Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and the culture. It's WallBuilders Live, and we're talking about today's hottest topics on policy, faith, and the culture, always from a biblical and historical and constitutional perspective. That means we're taking whatever the hot issue of the day is, and we're looking at it from that historical perspective. We're looking at how it affects the Constitution or how it would be applied within our constitutional republic. And then, of course, what is that biblical perspective on the issue as well? We're here with David Barton, America's premier historian and our founder at WallBuilders. Jonathan Ritchie is sitting in with us today as well. And my name is Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach. We want to encourage you to visit our WallBuildersLive.com website today. It is Giving Tuesday. So this is the big day every year that every nonprofit you've ever heard of is asking you for donations today. And, of course, we want to be in that mix. And so we're actually want to challenge you to become a big part of what we do here at WallBuilders. This is a listener-supported program, and also our entire ministry, everything we do to train legislators and young leaders and pastors and teachers and all of the things that we do at WallBuilders. It is making a difference. It is equipping, inspiring. It is training people to be good citizens in every area of the culture, literally preserving freedom for future generations. And you may sometimes wonder, what can I do to help preserve freedom? What can I do to make sure my kids live in the same freedom that I've enjoyed? Well, the easiest thing to do, and maybe one of the most important, is to donate to WallBuilders Live, because when you do that, those dollars allow us to multiply our voice. It allows us to train more pastors, more legislators, more young leaders, more teachers in these fundamental principles, and that's what it's going to take to restore America's Constitution. So here on Giving Tuesday, I know you're getting asked by everybody. Your inbox is probably full of emails from every nonprofit you've ever donated to. But I just want to ask that you would consider WallBuilders Live today as well, and that maybe it's the biggest donation you've ever given to WallBuilders Live. Or maybe due to the COVID crackdowns and everything that's going on, you can't give what you normally give, but you can still give something. We so appreciate you doing that. We appreciate you coming alongside us, literally locking shields with us and helping us to continue to be a positive impact on the culture. Thanks for thinking of us today on Giving Tuesday. WallBuildersLive.com. The donate button's right there up at the top. We appreciate you being a part of it. All right, David, Jonathan, we got an interesting guest today. Not our normal type of guest on WallBuilders Live. People typically think, somebody that's in politics or an attorney or a pastor or something like that. This one's a little different.
Well, it is a little different. It's different in a number of ways. Now, we're about truth at WallBuilders Live, so we're going to try to put out truth and try to present guests who have truth. And sometimes that truth will come from unexpected places, or at least from, I guess the way to say it, we're into labeling so much today. Everybody's labeled with a certain label, and if you're a certain label, this is what you believe. And today's guest is going to be one that doesn't fit the normal label. So let me kind of set this up by asking you guys right up front, if I asked you to name liberal groups, what liberal groups would you name? Give me some.
Pro-abortion.
All right, pro-abortion, so Planned Parenthood.
Jonathan?
Bloomberg News.
Look at the Gen Z. I don't know whether
I just don't like identifying people as this or that. I just want everybody to self-identify themselves.
Got a millennial Gen Z here.
I just don't want to be
along.
bigoted.
Yeah, I call him a Mil Z because you're right there between Gen Z and millennials. So you don't even know what a liberal group is, do you?
Aren't we all just friends?
Yeah, exactly. All right, Rick, back to you. So you got Planned Parenthood. What else?
Oh, the Gretas of the world.
Yeah, you've got the climate change kind of stuff that's going on for sure. The IPCC at the UN.
Teachers unions,
NEA.
I immediately think,
Open border people.
People. Yep.
George Soros.
The ACLU's George Soros, exactly.
The news media.
News media, absolutely.
LGBT kind of sexual revolution folks.
Absolutely. Okay, let me throw out an organization, Greenpeace. What do you know about Greenpeace? Is it liberal or not?
Yes.
All right, Greenpeace is liberal. When were they founded? What do they do?
Sounds like the 70s for some reason.
Yep, thanks 70s. 71 is right. Greenpeace is founded. So what are they known for?
Green peace.
With someone with the last name Green, I should know the answer to this.
You should.
I don't know. I mean, I've heard it forever, but I can't remember. I just kind of throw them into the environmentalist group, but I don't know what their specific mission is.
Well, they were activists for green. Everything is kind of PC now. We go green. So you go to motels and they're green, and you've got all these signs up about how we support green. So it really is the sense of environmental protection. So that's what they were there for. When they got started back in 71, they were seen as really radical liberals. way out liberals. They were opposed to all nuclear testing for any reason, any way, shape, fashion, form. They got started in 71. Now, they've expanded. There's 55 nations that have chapters of Greenpeace, some way, shape, fashion, form. So they're an international kind of a group. But here's how Britannica explained who they were. They were for preserving endangered species of animals, preventing environmental abuses, and heightening environmental awareness through direct confrontation with polluting corporations and government authorities. So the thing was, anything that harms the earth in any way, we're going to come after you. So they were the ones who went after nuclear testing. They went after whale hunting and seals. They were the ones who, would put their boats between the whale hunting ships and the seals or the whales. They really went after any kind of dumping of chemicals of any way, shape, fashion, form. I mean, they were really seen as anti-business and almost worshiping the earth. It's like the earth is our God, and you can't do anything to harm the earth, and we will defend the earth because she needs defending. And it really was radical extreme environmentalism at the time. So having said all that, the reason I asked that is because today's guest on WallBuilders Live is a founder of Greenpeace.
Wow.
And you go, wait a minute, on WallBuilders Live?
We're having on WallBuilders Live a founder of Greenpeace.
A founder of Greenpeace. And that's not what anybody on the left, if they heard that he was on WallBuilders Live, the left would say, no, you got the wrong guy. Check it again. It's not the Greenpeace guy. But this is one of the things that, I don't care what your label is. If you're standing for what is proven to be verifiable, objective truth, not just your opinion, you're welcome to your opinion. But if you're standing for truth, then you're an ally as far as I'm concerned, even if we don't agree on everything else out there. If wherever we can find truth and find common ground and truth, I'll stand with you. And so what we've got today, this is going to be kind of mind-blowing for anybody who knows labels, because this guy didn't fit our label at all, and we don't fit his label at all. Doesn't matter. We got common ground, and of all places, it is on climate change. And so what he has said and done on climate change is, it sounds like something we would say and do, but he has scientific stats and information that will absolutely blow people away.
Wow.
It's going to be pretty cool, and like you said, very, very different. And can I say pretty cool when we're in the context of global warming? Does that work?
That's a good one, although you may have to explain that word to our Mill Z kid over here.
These chilling facts.
Yeah, he may not get that.
All right, stay with us, folks. You're going to be surprised by this one. Dr. Patrick Moore, our special guest. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. Hey friends, it is not too late to join us for the crash course in history and government for all those folks that are schooling from home. Now that could mean a lot of things. Schooling from home could mean that you've been homeschooling your kids from the beginning, or it could mean you've been thrust into homeschooling as a result of the COVID crackdowns, or it could mean you don't even have kids at home, but you're still schooling, because we all are still learning every day, right? So really, this program is available for anyone, and it's not too late to join us. Even though we started on May 4th, we're doing every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon throughout May, and you can join at any time, and when you join, you will be able to get the recordings of any of the afternoons that you missed. Remember, this is a live opportunity to learn about history and government, to bring those things to life, and we're going to have special guests every afternoon. People that have been in our Chasing American Legends program, people from, Dr. Alveda King, David Barton, Tim Barton, Brad Stein, all kinds of great folks are going to be joining us. You need to be there as well. Go to patriotacademy.com to sign up today. patriotacademy.com. It's not too late, and you'll get recordings of any live afternoons that you missed. Get the crash course in history and government at patriotacademy.com. Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us today. We are excited today to have Dr. Patrick Moore. He's one of the original co-founders and longtime leaders of Greenpeace. Dr. Moore, thanks for some time today, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Great to be with you, Rick.
Well, you have been pointing out how the lack of science, actually, and certainly lack of consensus in science, does not lend to the hysteria that we often see right now in terms of the world's going to end tomorrow and therefore government needs to spend a lot more money. So you've been trying to point this out to folks, and we just wanted our listeners to hear some of the very salient points you've been making, from the science part of it with the Earth's temperature to just the economic impact. How do you change the world's opinion in 10 minutes? Let's figure out how to do this today.
It's not easy, Rick, because it's a very complicated issue as the climate of the Earth is. It involves the oceans and the atmosphere and the forests and the farms and every other piece of this planet. So you can't just expect people to have all that in their heads when they've got other things to do.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is we are not in an unusual climate at the moment. This is called the Holocene interglacial period. There have been many of them since the Ice Age began. Most people don't realize that, everybody's saying it's too hot, but it's actually colder now in general during this period than it has been since the last glaciation. So we have no idea what the future climate of the Earth is going to be. And the idea that a minuscule amount of carbon dioxide is going to change that and turn it into a hothouse is completely crazy. This Earth has had way higher levels of CO2 in the past when life flourished and was even greener than today. The poles were green. They weren't covered in ice then. The only reason they're covered in ice is because we're in an ice age. So people have to get this in perspective. In historical terms, during this era, CO2 is lower than it has been in the history of the Earth.
Wow.
It went down to 180 parts per million. That's 0.018% during the last major glaciation, and has been going down to those levels during the last quite a few glaciations. And then it comes up again coming into the interglacial period because the oceans warm and give off CO2. The oceans have 50 times as much carbon dioxide in them as the air does. So a little change in oceanic CO2 makes a big change in atmospheric CO2, relatively. But even at 410, which we have managed to get it up to from 280, where it started at the beginning of the industrial era, it's still very, very low compared to the historical norms of CO2 in the global atmosphere, and especially it's very low for plants. They would like to have 800, 1,000, 1,200 ppm in order to have maximum growth, which is why all commercial greenhouse operators find it worthwhile to buy bottled CO2 and put it into their greenhouse to get 20 to 60% more yield. And that's what our CO2 is doing to the Earth's vegetation right now, increasing the yield in agriculture and forestry and causing green plants to spread over a larger area of the Earth than they were when CO2 was lower.
So wait, the very thing that the alarmists are saying the world's going to end in 10 years over or 20 years or whatever the latest claim is, the very thing they're saying is so terrible, you're saying has actually been a good thing and is producing better crops and more crops for us.
Yes, well, what people have to know is that carbon dioxide is the basis of all life. That's where the carbon comes from, both on the land and in the sea. For all living things, it comes from CO2 in the atmosphere and dissolved in the ocean. And that's the way it's been since the beginning of life. And life has gradually sucked a lot of the CO2 out of the atmosphere and put it in fossil fuels and also into carbonaceous rocks, which almost no one's ever heard of, but it's called limestone. And that limestone is the remains of the shells of marine organisms that combined calcium and carbon dioxide to make calcium carbonate, which is what limestone is. And it's what we make cement with, too. And that puts CO2 back in the atmosphere as well. The key thing to remember is every fossil fuel we burn used to be a tree or a plankton in the sea, and it took the CO2 out of the atmosphere and out of the ocean. We're just putting it back where it came from. It's not like we invented CO2. It was there in the first place, but it has gradually been drawn down to much lower levels than it was in the early history of the Earth. And anybody can look this up on the internet these days. You don't need an Encyclopedia Britannica anymore to wade through and try and find stuff. It's just put in the right keywords, and you will find out what I'm saying is all true.
And one of the things you recommended, David Simon's 6 factual reasons, and one of the things he points out at the end of that is that even if all of the legislation was passed and we took, they had the micromanaging of the economy and I think destruction of the economy in many ways, if all of that was done, even if we did everything they're proposing, it would reduce global warming, he says, by a negligible 0.052 Celsius by 2050. Yeah. And so to put that in terms to a layman like me that doesn't understand all this stuff, does that basically mean it really wouldn't make much of a difference?
Doesn't make any difference as far as we're concerned. Look at the difference in temperature just between Miami and New York City. And they're saying that 1.5 degrees Celsius or approximately 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit is going to cause all the species to go extinct and we're all going to die. It is so completely ridiculous that anybody who believes it is a complete idiot if they don't do a little bit of research and figure out that you don't die if you move from New York to Miami, even though the average temperature goes up by considerably a lot more than that. And if you go from Miami to the Brazilian jungle, it goes up by even more. So people are living in all these places. As a matter of fact, the only people who are fleeing from the climate are fleeing from the cold countries to a nice warm country further south to get away from their miserable winters. And that is the truth. Like if it was the other way around, I could understand them believing it. If everybody was fleeing from Brazil to try to get to the Northwest Territories in Canada, in the winter, then I'd say, okay, well, maybe it wouldn't be such a good idea if it got warmer. But the fact of the matter is it would be a good idea if it got a little bit warmer, and it's definitely beneficial for CO2 to be increased in the atmosphere in order to encourage the growth of forests and farm crops, etc. Everything grows better. The thing about talking to your plants, people thought that was kind of silly, that, sure, the plants can hear you and that'll make them happy and grow better. No, you are breathing 40,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide on them when you are facing them and talking to them. That's why plants like you talking to them, because you're feeding them with your breath. Whereas plants use CO2 and produce oxygen, humans and all animals use oxygen and produce CO2. It's a perfect cycle between plants and animals. Animals would not be possible if it wasn't for plants, because they take basic materials like carbon dioxide and water and make them into life, whereas animals don't make the life. We have to eat life in order to make ourselves. But the plants, they come from, it's just amazing. I mean, they come from just carbon dioxide, water, and a bunch of minerals, and they turn into life. So they are the first miracle of life, and then they made it possible for animals who can eat the plants and get the nutrition that they have produced, the sugars that they make through photosynthesis, to give us our food. And we should be celebrating the fact that we're alive. We should not be worrying that we're all going to die in 10 years.
Right.
It's so stupid. Of course, we are all going to die. And I think this tendency to believe in doom and gloom and apocalypse and the end times and all this is a projection of one's own fear of death. And if you don't fear death like I don't, I haven't got the slightest fear of death. I know when my time comes, it comes. And I'm happy with that because I got to live. Where other people are afraid, and if you're afraid of your own death, you will try to project that onto the whole world as if the world ends when you die.
Right.
I see that as being the way it is in people's minds, and they've got to get out of that headspace and smarten up and be happy.
Well, a couple of your books that we want to recommend today. Trees Are the Answer goes deeper into what you were just discussing, and then Confessions of a Greenpeace Dropout, The Making of a Sensible Environmentalist, another one, and then your videos on PragerU, and we'll have a link today to all of those as well. And that's really what it comes down to, is being economically rational and scientifically based as an environmentalist, and you embody that greatly. We really appreciate you coming on today and sharing with us. Dr. Patrick Moore, thanks for being on. Let's do it again.
Thank you very much, Rick. I'd love to. I got a few more things to say.
Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. Hey friends, thanks so much for listening to WallBuilders Live. We appreciate you being a supporter of this program as well. As you know, it's Giving Tuesday. What a great opportunity for you to come alongside us at WallBuilders Live. It may be a small contribution. Perhaps you can give up one good cup of coffee and make that $5 contribution today, or maybe you can afford to do a several $100 or several $1,000 contribution. This Giving Tuesday is a wonderful opportunity for you to invest in the nonprofit organizations that you know are making a big difference in the culture. WallBuilders is certainly doing that as we train pastors and legislators and young leaders and teachers and so many others to know their rights, to understand the constitutional principles and biblical principles that made our nation great, and then know how to sow those into the next generation and the future of our country. You can be a part of that by donating today at wallbuilderslive.com. Make this Giving Tuesday count. We appreciate you coming alongside us at WallBuilders Live. We're back on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks to Dr. Patrick Moore for joining us as well. Back with David Barton And Jonathan Ritchie, and as we were on break, we found out Jonathan is suffering from eco-anxiety. So,
it's just I was afraid of thunderstorms when I was a kid, and I just never grew up.
This is no kidding though. You were saying on the break, this is a real deal. I mean, they're like clinically calling this thing eco-anxiety.
All the way. Recently, over 1,000 clinical psychologists signed like an open letter, really highlighting this, mental trauma, saying that, thousands of people all across the world have been suffering from, quote, acute trauma on a global scale in response to extreme weather events.
Wow.
And I mean, like, we were doing some research just the other week that young people, millennials, aren't getting married or having children anymore because they're so afraid of the climate change, this big boogie monster, and so they're projecting their own fears of the death of the world, just like what Dr. Moore was talking about, this idea of projection. They're just afraid of it so much that they've stopped doing anything that would seemingly affect negatively Mother Earth.
Well, it's interesting that, he had that perspective, and he was coming at things different than we do. I mean, he's a big-time evolutionist. We're not. And I don't know if he believes in theistic evolution or if it's billions of years kind of guy, and there are people who believe God created it just in billions of years. But he's, I'm a young earther. We're young earthers. He's billions of years. And so
I'm the youngest earther here.
Yeah, of us, you are. That's right.
Boom.
So for where he is, and, at the end, he said, I'm not afraid of death. These people are taking their own fear of death and projecting it onto everybody else in the world. But I just couldn't write down all the comments he was making that is so opposite of what people in his movement believe. I mean, he said, we're not in an unusual climate at the moment. Well, ask Greta. What does she think about that?
How dare you?
How dare you say that? He said, we're colder now in general than since the last glaciation. We have no idea what will happen in the future. He said there's only minuscule amounts of carbon dioxide. He says CO2 is lower today than it's been in the history of the Earth. I mean, this is all opposite to what all these other guys are saying.
We need more CO2? Hold on. I've been told that we need to get rid of all the CO2.
Oh, this was amazing. But see, he's doing it on science. He's not. This is the kind of guy, I love the fact that he appreciates truth. And when you get statistical, objective, scientific truth, and we've covered in other programs that the science is very clear on this global warming stuff. As a matter of fact, nobody pays attention, but for the last 5 years, the scientific journals have been loudly warning about coming glaciation, that we're entering into an ice age. Nobody told Greta that, and she goes to the UN and talking about how we're going to burn the world up.
Yeah, we've stolen her hopes and
dreams. We've stolen her hopes, and what'd you call that?
Eco-anxiety.
Eco-anxiety, and she's projecting that onto everybody. I mean, this was just so refreshing to have a guy who's a scientist, and did he know his stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, he was just rattling off.
Machine gun.
Machine gun, and I mean, just boom, boom, boom. By the way, I had no clue that having more cement puts CO2 back in the Earth's environment.
Yeah, I thought the cities were killing everything.
Yeah, let's build some more skyscrapers, some more highways. I mean,
it's like they get everything exactly backwards. And two, it's like if they didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all. Because on the one hand, you get the Green New Deal where we need to kill all the cows, and then you get the Oscar Joaquin Phoenix, or however you say it, Phoenix, saying that cows are basically human. So what do we do? Are the cows putting too much CO2, or do we need to protect their feelings? I'm totally confused on what do we do to protect the environment here, and it turns out we just build more skyscrapers.
Yeah, that's right.
You're supposed to do nothing, Jonathan. You're literally nothing with your life. You're supposed to go live in a hut somewhere and not affect the environment at all. That's what you're supposed to do.
Already done.
I loved his analogy, and I just wrote down his quote. He said, global warming is so completely ridiculous, or climate change is so completely ridiculous that anybody who believes it is a complete idiot. But he made the point, and I hadn't used this analogy, but I've been talking to young people about this. All right, we're talking over the last all this thing that's been, and by the way, anybody that doesn't remember, in 1976, they had congressional hearings on what they said was the coming ice age. And in 1976, Congress issued all these reports. You need to stockpile food because everything's going to freeze. You won't be able to grow foods. Agriculture is going to shut down because everything's going to be a glacier. That's in 1976. They said imminent glaciation. So here we are now, less than 50 years later. We're talking essentially 44 years later, and what we're saying is all going to burn up. The temperature since 76 has only increased 0.6 of 1 degree. Now tell me how we're going to burn up with 0.6. You can't.
Those are rookie numbers.
Exactly. You can't even feel the difference. But I thought what he said, even if you say it's 3.5 degrees, That's like moving from Miami to New York. He said,
Well, that might kill you.
hey, it does move in New York, but not the temperature. The gun control in New York may kill you because you can't defend yourself. But, I mean, that's a perfect point. Even if it's radical, even if it's 6 times higher than what all the phobia is right now, over 0.6 of a degree, so what? I mean, if you move from Brazilian rainforest to the Northwest Territory, it's cold up there, but it doesn't kill you. And so all the fear over this, I thought he had such a good point in addressing the fear.
Absolutely. And I feel like, right, the Bible, if you know the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
How much happier would people be if they actually knew that there was nothing to worry about? Obviously, we need to be good stewards of what God has given us.
That's right.
But we're not anywhere close to blowing up the world because of cows.
You haven't been hanging out with Joaquin Phoenix enough. He would set us straight on that one. No, I mean, you guys are exactly right. There's a difference in the way you live your life based on your worldview, your theology, even just, again, being open to truth and actually getting truth from a scientist like this. So special thanks to Dr. Patrick Moore for joining us today here on WallBuilders Live. As I mentioned at the beginning, please visit our website today, wallbuilderslive.com, here on Giving Tuesday, and make that one-time or monthly contribution to WallBuilders Live. I'm telling you, those donations go a long ways to save freedom for future generations. That is not an exaggeration. I mean, every investment you make in WallBuilders Live multiplies our voice. It means more people are becoming Constitution coaches and hosting classes in their homes and churches and teaching that biblical citizenship. More pastors are going to Washington, D.C. with us and doing the briefings and getting the opportunity to take that back to their home church. More legislators are able to be trained. More teachers, more young leaders of the next generation. Every dollar you invest in WallBuilders Live is an investment in the future of freedom. So thank you. Thank you for being a part of that here on Giving Tuesday. Check it out at wallbuilderslive.com today. Donate button's real easy to find there. Make that one-time or monthly contribution. We thank you for coming alongside us. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.